Here's the small one. Here's the one that's going in.
Stand real forward as far as you can. There you go.
Hey YouTube, welcome back to Locked In Anglers. We've got an awesome video for you guys today where we broke down exactly how we won the Wild West Bass Trail on Moses Lake. We'll go through the gear we used, where we threw it, and most importantly, the mentality that we had coming into the event, because we really feel like it was a pretty unique perspective that helped set us apart from the rest of the competition. We really appreciate you guys helping and support the channel. Please hit the like button, subscribe, send this to your friends. We just want to help grow the following around this channel and just help get more information out to the bass fishing community. All right, let's get into the details. So let's just start with our mentality. So it all started with practice. Practice was really easy for us to catch fish, but it was a pretty tough bite to get the better sized fish. What we realized is that Moses Lake has a mix of smallmouth and largemouth. The smallmouth bite was pretty easy. The largemouth bite was really tough. It was really tough to find multiple fish, or at least 5 largemouth to make out a whole bag. So we knew it was going to take a mixed bag to win the tournament, because there were some pretty decent sized smallmouth that were pretty easy to catch. But what we noticed is that the larger smallmouth were very spread out from the rest of the larger schools. They were on really isolated structure, usually on rock or sand just outside of the weed lines, and they were pretty easy to catch, but it was really tough to find them because they were a bit random. They were all on that same type of structure, but you had to cover a ton of water to pull up on specific smallmouth that were actually feeding at that time on those areas. So after we found that bite, we wanted to make sure that we had a way to pull some consistent bag together. So we wanted to go and find some offshore smallmouth. This time of year, the fish get really schooled up, and so we ran offshore rock piles on the edge of weed lines in about 8 to 14 feet of water and just started hammering them out there. It was really easy to put those fish together, but the size wasn't great. We couldn't find many fish over that 2.5, 2 3/4 pound range until we pulled up on one spot. It's a pretty large community area. It's a bridge that connects 2 sections of the lake. There's some natural current that flows through, and we pulled up first 2 casts, caught one that was about 2 3/4, and then the next cast I caught one that was about 2.5, and we knew that there was a pretty decent population there, and we've both caught big fish there in the past, and so we knew it was probably going to be a pretty special area if we could get to it, just with the feedback that we were seeing, the fish that we were seeing on the live scope. We knew that it'd be, if we got a good boat number, that we could make a run there and probably catch some good fish. But the one thing that we had in the back of our head this whole time is topwater. Topwater is the best way you can catch big fish after the post spawn, and we grinded the topwater bite, covered a ton of bank, and we just couldn't really put together many topwater fish. And the ones that we did were that same kind of 2.5, 2 3/4 pound size. But we knew in our heads that we had to commit to it for a portion of the beginning of the tournament. And what we thought was that maybe, just maybe, that if we paired the topwater with areas with schooling fish, we might be able to pull the biggest fish out there, out of that school really early in the day when they were the most susceptible. So our plan, once we found out, we were boat number 1 right off the gate. So it was super exciting. We were very rarely boat 1, so it was awesome to kind of get a pick of where we wanted to start. And we had our mind set on that bridge, and so we went straight to the bridge right off the bat and just started hammering them. I think we probably caught 30 fish in the first hour and a half of the tournament and put a lot of our bag together. And so, but the key, we rolled right up on that spot and we started immediately with topwater. Travis started throwing a topwater. There's a little bit of a reed edge that can hold some largemouth right next to that bridge. And so he came out there, he was throwing a 6 Sense Dogma, and then also the Storm Arashi topwater. And the Arashi one's a little bit of a bigger size, and right off the bat we got a largemouth right off the bat, and then we got one of our kicker largemouth probably about 20 minutes later, and they got sucked into the whole feeding frenzy mentality, and that topwater just helped separate that larger size fish and came up and crushed it right off the bat and got us a really good start to our bag. But then after that, the real focus for us was keeping that school of fish that we found on that bridge going, because there was a ton of fish and we kept catching them. But we had to keep mixing up baits to keep it interesting for the fish and to keep eliciting different bites. So we relied on a handful of different baits, and it was all related to what the conditions were doing around us. So when it slicked off and there was no wind, we went subsurface or topwater. So for subsurface, we had 3 reel baits that we really relied on. It was a dry creek tube in the larger 4.5-inch size, a green pumpkin Kitech finesse football jig with a Rage Menace on the back. And then if it was really tough, we hadn't got a bite in a little bit, we would go to a spinning rod and throw the really small size tube on an 1/8 ounce head to get a really slow rate of fall and presentation down to the fish. And we were able to keep that school firing for almost an hour and a half and just kept picking off fish left and right. There was a handful that didn't make culls. We ended up culling about probably 6 times on that spot and got a bag up to about 18 and a half, 19 pounds. And it was just mixing up that combination of the finesse baits when it was slick, and when it got a little ripple on the water, I pulled a couple of our big smallmouth on my favorite crankbait, the rock crawler, the Spro rock crawler, red bug color. I just got that bait down there and just grinded it through the rocks that were set up underneath the bridge, and just had a couple come up and thump it, and really helped. That bait in particular really helped pull together a couple of our big smallmouth. The next step of our day was really interesting, because we knew from our practice that outside of firing up an early school, getting a big fish later in the day was going to be really tough, and it would require just an absolute grinder mentality. The largemouth were very few and far between. The day before the tournament, on the official practice, I went through and I covered, I want to say probably about 14 miles of shoreline just with my eyes looking, trying to find largemouth, and I found 5. And this is a pretty clear body of water, and I saw 5 largemouth. And so we picked a stretch that I found the most amount of fish. There was some smallmouth mixed in there, and the smallmouth were still doing a pretty similar thing. They were sitting on those like shallow, isolated rock areas that were next to the weed lines. And so we knew that once we had that bag, that 19 and a half pounds, that we had to just absolutely grind and throw either a Senko and flip for the rest of the day to try to get another kicker largemouth to get our bag over that 20-pound mark. And we did it for 5 hours. We just absolutely grinded, and we caught 1 fish. And it was a big cull. I caught about a almost 4-pound smallmouth throwing a Senko, just trying to cover those areas really thoroughly, and we just beat the bank for the next 5 hours and made that 1 cull. Got us over that 20, got us to about 20 and a quarter pounds, and it was enough to seal the deal, or so we thought, before we started dealing with fish care problems. So the day, it was 107 degrees. It was boiling hot. So we prepared for it. We had fish care. We had 3 bags of ice to keep the fish cool in the live well, and then tons of water for us to keep us hydrated. But despite setting an alarm on our phone for every 10 minutes to make sure that these fish were still alive, we had 1 smallmouth die on us about midday. Once the outside temperature got to about 100 degrees, it just we couldn't keep it alive. And maybe about an hour later of us really diligently keeping track of our fish, keeping ice in there, we had another smallmouth that started to go on us, and it was about noon in the tournament, and we still had a ton of time to fish for the rest of the day. And we made the decision to go in early, and it was something that we've never done before. We're always that guy that rolls in at the last second, because we usually catch fish. We're more likely to catch fish on our last cast of the day than the first cast of the day. And so we're pretty emphatic about coming in late, as late as possible. And this tournament, we knew we had a bag that was pretty close. We thought it was going to get one. We thought it would be one with about 18 and a half, 18 and 3/4. We knew we had about 20 and a quarter before the penalties, and we had that 1 fish that was just right on the edge. And so we came flying back to weigh-in. We drove literally from the far end of the lake all the way to the weigh-in, and weighed our fish in early. And it was a tough decision, but I mean, it obviously ended up being the right decision, but we had another smallmouth by the time we got there that was on the verge as well. And because our bag was 3 smallmouth and 2 largemouth, we didn't want to lose another fish. We made the decision, we pulled into the weigh-in and we weighed in our fish. One of them just unfortunately had passed away in the morning. The other one passed away somewhere on the ride there. So we ended up weighing in 2 dead fish, took a half-pound penalty, but still came off with the tournament win, which was awesome. Always hate to lose fish. We tried our very best, but there's just sometimes you just can't do anything about it. That's just 107 degrees is really hot for smallmouth, and the lake temperature was about 94 degrees, so that's just not a good recipe for success for smallmouth. But to round this all out, we really felt like it was important to talk about our mental strategy outside of the baits and the selection that we used. The mentality that we came into this tournament with is that we knew that there was a mix of schooling fish and then your isolated cruisers. And for us, we had 10 schools of offshore smallmouth, and we knew we could catch them easily, but like I mentioned before, the size wasn't great. So we thought that because in practice we had mostly targeted those offshore fish later in the day, that our best chance at catching a big one earlier in the day would be off that school, and it would just be because they'd be a little bit more susceptible to pulling a big one off of that school with a larger size bait, or just in a low light condition. So we started on the schooling fish, and it absolutely paid off for us. Caught those 2 big ones early, caught 2 big smallmouth early, and just really had to hunt for one more bite all day. And that's when we realized that it was going to turn into that real grinder of a day where we just cover a ton of water. So we put that trolling motor on 5 because we still had to be a little bit subtle, and we just started flipping and throwing the Senko and just grinded and it paid off with one more big smallmouth. It was our biggest smallmouth of the day. And it just came on the 5-inch Senko. It's a bait that a lot of guys don't throw for smallmouth, and it's a bait that's just it's won us a lot of money. It's a fantastic smallmouth bait, 5-inch, 4-inch. They'll eat either size. We catch a lot of big ones on the 5-inch, and it's just a great bait to use around those weed edges, or around like a transition between weed and rock where you run into it's hard to run a bait straight through there, and especially when there's more finesse conditions. Going to that Senko, getting that into the pockets, it's just the best way to do it, and it panned out for us. And it was a perfect testament to following our plan, trusting our gut, knowing that we weren't going to get a ton of bites in the back half of the day, but just grinding it out to get that one that we needed. I really I stress the importance of making a plan before the tournament, not only where you're going to fish, but the approach that you have to have mentally for how many fish you're going to catch, so you don't spin yourself out throughout the course of the day, and you have a really clear plan going into it. For us, we were fishing pretty clear water for a lot of the day, so we were running 12-pound sunline for everything, basically every approach that we were running outside of the Topwater. But one of the other key elements is that we knew we'd be fishing around grass, and something that is really helpful when you're fishing for smallmouth or largemouth around grass is using the braid to leader combo, and using a slightly shorter fluorocarbon leader, because it gives you more braid to cut the grass, because the braid will literally pop the grass and just saw right through it, and it helps with your ability to land fish significantly more, as the braid does a lot of the work that you might have to pull a fish with fluorocarbon through the grass and bring the grass with it, where the braid will actually just literally cut the grass and not even make it a problem as the fish runs across the water. So that was a huge portion of our success when we were actually up in the grass. It was the only reason I got that smallmouth in the boat, because I hooked that fish and it went bananas. It just shot right through reeds, right through the grass, and that I could literally just feel in my rod the underwater grass just popping as I was holding on to it, and the fish was just running across the boat. So really big tip, really would recommend it, especially in the summertime when that grass gets up close to the surface. Well, I hope you guys were able to take something away from this. We love doing these tournament deep dives, especially on tournaments that you do well in, but even in ones that you don't do well in, having that 2020 look back on on how your tournament day went, what went well, what didn't go well. It's a really good way to continue to grow as an angler and to grow as a tournament fisherman. So I really recommend you doing that for both the good and the bad events. It's just a great way to debrief, understand what happened, and make sure that you don't make the same mistakes or keep making good decisions going forward. Well, I hope you guys really liked the video. Hit the like button, subscribe, and catch you guys in the next one. Tight lines.